Hi everyone, my name's PK and here I have Shane Caudwell. It's a really unique episode, I think, because Shane's an extraordinary guy. His sort of background speaks for itself. I probably won't do it justice, but he joined the military when he was 15. He's been in so many different conflicts around the world, both from an Australian Defence Force perspective and also from a UN perspective, including, the conflict in Bosnia and Sarajevo and all that sort of things that were going on. That's really shifted his perspective and mindset and become the man he is today. But he's also now a property investor, and so we'll talk about his mindset. We'll talk about how he's a property investor in WA. We'll talk about his exit strategies and also his sort of plan or strategy for retirement, his retirement planning approach, because it's something that I think less than 0.01% of people think about the way he's thinking in his retirement planning. And I think it's something tangential in a way for this channel, but at the same time, it's very core because we need to stretch our belief systems, we need to stretch our horizons. And it's only when we do that, then we actually may get the best outcome for ourselves and our family. And he's definitely done that. I won't hog the mic too much, but thank you so much, Shane, for making time.
Thanks very much for having me, PK. I appreciate it, mate. And very, very nice to meet you as such.
Likewise, likewise. I just wanted to start by asking a few questions, but just as a bit of context, Shane's part of a Facebook group, and I just saw him comment about his sort of approach and strategies every now and then on different posts, and it was all very well measured and balanced and but different. All right, and that's why I thought let me reach out to him and see if he wanted to come on the show, and he very kindly he said yes. So we might start off with your background, Shane. You joined the military at 15. Could you just, I mean, it's hard to summarize all that experience in a few minutes, but like, what was that experience like?
Um, back in the olden days, when I joined the military, so I joined the military in the early 80s. I come from a military family. I have my great grandfathers, my grandfathers, my fathers, my medals. We sort of have that sort of history in the family. My father had done an army apprenticeship, and in those days, you joined at 15, you did an apprenticeship. You, after your apprenticeship was completed, you turned 18, you then went out to a military unit and completed your apprenticeship. I joined the Air Force originally as an aircraft engine fitter. So I spent 2.5 years in Wagga, New South Wales, learning to be an engine fitter. I was one of the youngest in my intake. We just recently had a 40th reunion, and there were some guys still serving at quite high levels. I graduated, I was 17 years and 9 months. So I went to Townsville to a unit there that had Iroquois helicopters and caribous. And at 17 and 9, you're still very much a lad, had a lot to learn at that stage. I was in Townsville for a few years. I was then posted down to Brisbane, to Ipswich, to Amberley, and an offer came for me to join the army, to go back to Townsville to work on the Black Hawks, which had been given to the army, and they needed rotary wing trained fitters. So I accepted that offer and I moved back to Townsville. Um, I spent a couple of years there working on Black Hawks, and my initial 9 year period was coming up, and I had to decide, did I want to stay in the military and make it a career, or did I want to leave? And I decided at that stage that I'd been in it since I was 15. I wanted to leave. I wanted to exercise a few freedoms that I didn't have and I wasn't able to exercise. So I discharged and I moved to the Northwest Shelf in WA, or the gas project up there, for a year to save up the money. We lived in a caravan, just saved, didn't do anything, lived on, ramen noodles and, Sayo biscuits. Bought a one-way ticket to Hong Kong and then started the world travel. Went overland through China in the early 90s, where you needed special permissions to get into certain provinces and the police followed you and all the rest of it. And through parts of Asia, through Europe, and ended up in London, and was working in London when I kind of strangely was walking down a street with hair down to my backside and a great big beard. And a captain at one of the old regiments that I'd worked in was walking the other way, and I recognised him. And I sort of just pretended to shoulder charge him, and he thought he was being mugged on the streets of London. So we got talking and asked me what I was doing, and I was working for a fuel injection company, technical job, and that I'd got. And he said, explained to me what he was doing, and it was refueling, and it was things that I'd done in the Australian Army at the time. And he gave me his card, and I said, "Oh, we're going to have a beer, have a coffee." He said, "No, no, you just joined the UN, you idiot. See you in the morning." So I was recruited into the UN on a street in London, and yeah, that was the start of the career. So they changed the law in, I think it was 92, to allow civilian contractors to contract into the UN, and I was recruited by a company that had got in on that work, and that started off my UN career, or my contracting career. So the way it worked was we were effectively like skilled engineering or manpower, or one of those labour hire companies. These were just very specialist labour hire companies, and they, for my role in, say, Sarajevo, I had the equivalent military rank of captain, and I was responsible for all the projects in Sarajevo, in the conflict area there, for all their petroleum supply, lubrications, oils, refueling installations, aviation, and vehicular. Yeah, that was where that side of it all started, and I sort of lived in London for a while, roamed around the world, worked in North Africa, worked in the Middle East, worked in Asia, did all sorts of contracts. I worked in Pakistan for quite some time. Loved Pakistan. I'll tell you, for a while, if I couldn't live in Australia, Pakistan was the place I would have moved to. The Swat Valley was unbelievable. Maybe not so much now, so it's probably a
Don't
good
hear
thing.
that every day.
Yeah, good thing I didn't invest at the time. Yeah, it sort of went round and round, and lots of different places, lots of different travel. And for a couple of reasons, I came back to Australia I was back here for the GFC full time. So yeah, got back
Right.
here, and in a roundabout way got into fly in, fly out work in Western Australia, which is what I've been doing ever since, as I progress towards my end goals. So yeah, short
Right.
story, that's where it all ended up.
Oh, it's great summary. I know this is a property channel and we are going to talk property in a second, but I want to create a bit of a backdrop in terms of if you don't mind sharing, to the extent that you're comfortable, perhaps a few experiences, one or two experiences or something like that that you might have encountered, in these travels, let's say in conflict zones, etc. That has shifted or created the mindset that you have today. And that's number one. And
Yep.
number two is that's created your, let's say, life philosophy. Because when I was chatting to you on Messenger, um, there's a very clear life philosophy, or like, what do you think about life, or what do you think about the world? And I think you come across as someone who's thought about that a lot and has a quite a crystal clear picture because of everything you've gone through. So perhaps if you could, help us paint a picture of perhaps one or two transforming experiences in the conflict zones, and then how's that shifted who you are today?
Probably two incident or two parameters that set for me life wise to start with before property. I Going to places like that, doing jobs like that, you see some fairly horrific things. And without putting any detail into it, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I've already lived the worst day of my life. I've seen the worst things I will ever see. I've had to deal with the worst things I'll ever have to deal with. And I can honestly say that if and I'm not making light of any sort of terminal diagnosis, but if they turned around today and said, look, you have 6 months, 9 months, I really feel like that wouldn't be the heaviest heart that I've ever had to hold. You know what I mean? So I came away from some of that. The chink in the armor now is I have a television on the wall behind me, but it's plugged into a Blu-ray player. I'm not connected to television. I don't watch mainstream media. I can't watch a movie, read a book, or whatever where children are hurt. I can't. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to see it. I get emotional to start with, and I get very, very angry. So I don't open the lid to that box. And I mean, I don't make any. There's no secret about it. I know this is for public consumption. The people I work with, the people I respect, all know that, and I'm quite happy. I think that's not unreasonable to want the very best for any child, no matter what their creed, colour, or whatever. And I'm happy to die on that hill. So that sort of set the parameters. If I have a bad day at work, or if I were to have an investment that went wrong, I'd sort of give myself a bit of a crack in the ear and say, well, it could be worse. You're in a very good place. You're surrounded by decent people. You earn a good wage. You know, my family is cared for. Everything's happy. I meet people like you. I get involved with your podcasts and things like that. Life is on the up and up. That's probably the first thing. Is I can I don't let anything get me down, because I know that it could be a lot worse. As far as property goes, when I came back from that and I saw what happened in some of those places, sort of, I immediately had a drive to live on some acreage with big vegetable gardens and chickens and ducks and pigs and a workshop and a woodworking shop, and pursue hobbies like that. And I've really gone wholeheartedly into those sorts of hobbies, and really, really enjoy that lifestyle. Um, I guess you see people, particularly in Sarajevo, trapped in the city in an apartment. They found people with cardboard in their stomach, because that was all they had. They were burning furniture. They were, you see the worst of humanity, and you think, well, if I live out here, I don't ever expect to see a war or a conflict like that, but I do expect to see periods of unemployment or sickness, or issues that prevent me from earning a wage or living as I need to live. I mean, I'm at the end of 8 weeks of not being able to work after shoulder surgery. Luckily, I work for a company who was very supportive, and I've been able to deal with that, sort with that, and I'm ready to go back to work again. But it's literally meant nothing to me as far as finances, planning, what I'm going to do, moves I'm going to make. And so for me, when I came back, the impetus, you see a lot of talk on your website about, do I buy my principal place first and pay it off? Do I get some equity in? Do I use that? For me personally, there was no other way that would give me peace of mind other than to have a paid off property. It had to be completely unencumbered, not tied to any of my other loans or anything. I achieved that. And as I've said a few times, you can't explain, you can't measure the peace of mind knowing that no matter what happens to me, I can't have my property taken off me. I can grow something to eat. I can make a living from that property. If I wanted to open my toolbox again and start working from here, which I don't. I've been too long off the tools. It takes me too long to work out what I'm doing on my own motorbike now, let alone anybody else's. So that for me was the most important thing, and that's what I wanted to achieve when I first came home. I achieved that. I've now got a great property with a netted orchard and animal pens and chickens and ducks. And I imagine there's some people that disagree or don't want that lifestyle. That's fine. I live your best life, and I'll do the same. And once that was achieved, I sort of went through quite a process to work out what my retirement and what the end of my life, when it does come, would look like, which I guess is where we lead into now. So I chose a mix of stock market and property investing in a town that I knew very well. I knew street to street where the air quote good areas were and the not so good areas, and an understanding of where infrastructure was going. So I chose that method of investment, and I'm now at the point now where I may buy another one this year, but I'm looking at making a fairly major change next year, which will halve my income. It's still very affordable to buy another unit, but also you've got to look into the exit strategy. I sat down for many months, maybe a year or two, and just went figures after figures after figures of what I needed to live my life, what it needed to look like. I'm in a very lucky position, but I've worked hard to get there, that all those figures and all those columns now line up. And I literally set my investments and the way I would manage my life moving forward, that I could take a 50% hit on every single one of my investments, lose half, and still be probably, I will be comfortable, but basically comfortable. But I enjoy that sort of lifestyle, but it won't wipe me out.
Yeah.
That's where I am now. So the next stage is starting to look to that move where I leave Australia, where I head overseas. My plan will be eventually to spend, you know, 10, 11 months maybe overseas, 1 or 2 months in Australia while family are here. Eventually, I plan on probably not ever returning to Australia, because I will set myself up comfortably. I'm looking very specifically at 3 areas. One is already sorted. Another one I will start in September. And then there's a third area I'm going to look at. One of those areas, as I travel backwards and forwards and live my life, will gel more than the others. I'll cash out of two of them, move to the third, and try and be a benefit to the society kind enough to accept me.
Amazing. I just want to pick up on one thing that came to my mind. For people who've experienced the things that you've experienced, I think the number one of the biggest priorities in life becomes peace. Just security is one way to say it. And with security has connotations of like land and, like you're saying, animals and just space. But I think peace is kind of like the undertone, or we're really what folks are after. And it's a credit to you because of course I can't relate to it 100% because I've not been through those
Yeah.
experiences. But a lot of folks that have, they want peace, but when they come back, and this, of course, generalization, there's different people, but they kind of just live day to day, and they're not in that mindset or that mental space to actually craft a vision for their balance of their life, and then really go ahead and try to achieve it. Because it's, like you were saying, there's a ledger, there's numbers, you got to try to make the numbers work. I mean, this is a lot of stuff that you have to get involved. And, you're coming from a place where you're like, people were starving. So you understand the context, you understand the bigger thing to life. There's more to life than property, there's more to life than finances, there's more to life than financial freedom. But at the same time, to really have that peace, we also need to work on these monetary matters. And I think that's a really good, it's really great that you've been able to do that. I want to obviously go into maybe why you've selected the particular countries you've selected, why you want to leave Australia, but maybe just before we get to all that juicy stuff as well, where have you bought your properties, and like why did you buy there?
I'm down in the southwest of Western Australia. I'm 50k outside a town called Albany. I moved down here. It's kind of a strange way. A guy that I served in the military with, completely unbeknownst to me, we'd been in the same unit for some time. His brother ended up being my staff sergeant in the army. So there's a bit of family connection there. I was working for a hire dealer in Perth as a workshop supervisor, and I had a phone call, and they both had an unusual surname. And as soon as I saw it, I went, "Oh, I know who that is." So I rang him up and we had a bit of laugh. We hadn't seen each other for, I don't know, must have been 10 or 15 years, and had a bit of a chat. And we kind of kept in touch and said g'day. And then one day he rang and said, "Oh, are you interested in coming down to Albany? Are you interested in working in a hydraulic shop?" And it turned out that I moved to Albany and I went to work in a hydraulic shop. I wanted, I'd come back, it sort of got to the point where moved back to Australia for a number of reasons. I ex-wife at the time wanted to move back. I'm now divorced and have kept it that way. The hydraulic shop got me out of Perth, got me the lifestyle I wanted. As I said, I don't have TV. I would much rather be outside with my dogs. For good or bad, I'm also an avid hunter, target shooter, fisherman, canoe, motorbike, camping, backpacking. That's all I want to do. That's the sum, vegetable gardening and animal raising and playing in the workshop. That's the sum total of my life and my hobbies. I was able to achieve all of that in Albany, and my own house and my parents' house We're all on the same block. We're outside Albany, and my investment properties are in Albany. I was lucky for a little while. I worked for a water company, water corporation, and got to know Albany very well, street to street, issues, dramas, things to look out for. So I was able to leverage that knowledge and buy in Albany, and I've done very, very well. Though when I first started, I call it the milking stool, is actually what's written on the spreadsheet. And it included my principal place of residence, where I am now with my parents, that property. It included superannuation and included investment. And I worked out what I wanted, what I needed to retire and live a life. And then the challenge became, could I do that 3 times through those 3 mechanisms, through principal place of residence, super, and all the rest of it? After quite a few years of taking every hour that they gave me, I worked out, I can actually do this. I can achieve the required sum 3 times. I can, if we have a 20% drop in anything, it's not going to worry me. If we have a 50% drop, it won't worry me. That was how I came to the property, to how I would manage this place, how I'd manage my properties in Albany. That was the thought behind it all, to just build in redundancy after redundancy, to know that the lifestyle I want to lead on a couple of acres is a very cheap lifestyle once you've got everything set up. But it's very enjoyable. I couldn't think of anything worse than being trapped in a palatial home with no backyard and, having to employ somebody to change the light bulbs in the chandelier. I'd much rather live in a little log cabin in the middle of nowhere on a couple of acres with a creek down the road. That's my idea of heaven. And that's my plan to achieve that is well on track.
Does sound good. I must admit, it sounds like a pretty ideal lifestyle. If you can tune your body, and you can, get the skills to be comfortable with that lifestyle. I mean, I remember I read a book, I don't know what it was, like when I was a kid, and it was about a man who lived in like the woods in Canada, and he just had like this little shack that he lived in. And yeah, he just fished every day for like food and, the berries and fruits. And it was like a solitary but not lonely lifestyle. And I don't know, there's some sort of romance to it. I kind of really, it brings something up in my heart. I'm like, yeah, that's true peace. But anyway, I digress. But no, it sounds like
I 100% agree, though. You couldn't have put it better. If you're searching around on the internet, look up a guy called Dick Prenneke, Proenneke. In the late 60s, he went out into the wilderness and did that, and he recorded it on the wind-up Super 8 movie camera. So the movie became Alone in the Wilderness. There's 4 of them, and if ever you want an inspiration about what a good life looks like, that's what a good life looks like. And you would struggle to achieve it. You wouldn't achieve it today in Australia, but I
yeah.
think I can achieve it in other places.
Oh, I've got nothing else to do today. I'm going to actually watch that. Thanks for the tip. Well, I was going to ask, like, you're obviously, you're very patriotic to Australia. You've served in the military for many years. You're sort of, true blue in the sense, right? Why do you want to, like, in your golden years, so to speak, why do you want to leave Australia? I mean, isn't this the land of milk and honey?
I find I can't reconcile anymore with Australian politics. And I'm not saying which side, it doesn't matter. I can't resonate with either side of politics. I can only see the damage they're doing and the carnage they're wreaking in so many different ways. And I mean, people are passionate about the left, the right, the centre, an issue, that's great. Be passionate about all of that. For me, personally, I don't respect Australian politics. I can't gel with the mindset of the way. To me, the only way to fix Australian politics is to burn it down and start again. That's not going to happen. I don't want to be that angry, grumpy old dude up the road that whinges about whichever party's worth whinging about that week. I'd much rather say, look, I'm getting to the end of my working career. I've lived more of my life than I will live. Time for other people to have their say. Time for a younger generation, for you to mould Australia the way you want it. I just don't think it'll fit me. And rather than make any noise and any drama and be annoying and upset people, I'll just quietly bow out, leave it to I think I earn the right to have a say. I've got tattoos on my arm about where I went and what I did. I've got, from sitting in this chair, I can see all the unit plaques of every unit I served in the Australian military. As I said, on Anzac Day, I can put 3 rows of medals on my right and one on my left. I earned that right, but I um, don't want to be arrogant. I don't want to be annoying. I don't want to be abusive. I don't want to be overbearing. I just want to say, well, go and live your best life. This just doesn't work for me anymore for a number of reasons. It's not going to change, so I'm not going to lose too much sleep about it. I'm just going to make plans to go somewhere where I think the morals and the values that I insist on living my life by are understood far better. It's funny that, if I had to put a word, I would call it the West in air quotes. I don't want to live in the West. I'm going to be the only white man in where I live in the surrounding areas. It will mainly be an native, indigenous, whatever you want to call it. They're second, third world countries. I'm going to be very comfortable. A big issue for me is that any country that accepts me to come and live, I absolutely have to give back to that country. They've accepted me, so I'm not sure what that means, what that looks like yet, but 100% I want to be an asset to that place. I'm not interested in being an asset to Australia anymore. I think there's so much broken, so much fallen apart. Again, you get back to respect, and I just can't respect what's here. But by the same token, I don't want to yell and shout about it. I just want to wave goodbye, wish everybody all the very best, and hopefully they'll do the same for me and keep in touch via email or something.
Yeah. Nice. No, I
So,
think the big, I mean, of course, this channel's apolitical, much like what you're saying you are. But I think the big lesson is just to have the integrity to know what your principles are and then to follow through with them. I mean, Australia served so many people incredibly and continues to do so. I'm very grateful to be here, and I know a lot of my audience is very grateful to either be born here or come to Australia. But what I'm hearing, as in the core value that you're trying to or that you're expressing is that whatever your principles are, whatever your conviction is, you have a right to believe in it and not be influenced by others to change that belief structure. And then, have the guts, have the balls to follow through with that conviction, with your value system. And that's what integrity is. And so I think integrity is not something you have to earn, although if anyone's earned it, it's probably you. But integrity is something that everyone's born with, and it's about how much you live it, how much you express it, and how much you're true to it. So, no, thanks for sharing that. And so, I wanted to ask like a little bit about tax and things because it's like when you move countries, I'm sure there's enormous tax complications and things like that. But what's your criteria? I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing which
yeah.
countries you want to go to, but what's your
I, I,
criteria? Like which country, why have you chosen the locations?
um, I mean, I can name countries
Yeah, go for
also
it.
why I included it. Okay, so in Asia, I lived in both Thailand and Cambodia for extended periods of time. Cambodia at the moment has had a massive influx of Chinese cash. I have some fantastic contacts in Cambodia at quite high levels from when I worked there. And a couple of years back, what might have been a $100,000 shop house is now a $250,000 shop house. There's a whole bunch of reasons behind that, but at $250,000, it's automatic residency into Cambodia, and that's the chosen path for a lot of Chinese investors at the moment. I don't want to be competing against Chinese money. I do enjoy Cambodia. When I say enjoy, it's a weird kind of enjoy. If you've ever been there and you've seen something like the killing fields or the prison and you understand the history of Cambodia, it's brutal and it's terrible, and you can see why the people are the way they are. But you've got to take your hat off to a resilient race of people that have come back from that in 2 generations. That, for a bunch of reasons, it's tenure, visa setup, and all that is it's not insurmountable, but it's a little bit difficult, and you've always got that little edge. It might not click. You know, if you have a business visa, if you have a retirement visa. Thailand changes their visa rules so often that, you know, on a Wednesday, they'll decide they don't like, you know, just Thailand is what Thailand is. I love the country. It's an awesome place for a holiday. I like it right up north in the mountains. But you know, I've got friends living there now. They've just found out that their pensions are going to be taxed. And then the Foreign Investment Corporation they set up to buy property didn't have to trade up until this year, but it looks like they might have to show record of the FIC trading, even though they used it to just buy their house. It's too much. It's too up in the air. Malaysia had the MM2H visa, and then what they did was they decided they had too many people coming in, so retrospectively upped the requirement for their monthly pension, and that put a lot of people out. One person I know in particular had a military pension. He'd retired. He'd been there many years. He had a property. He had all that sort of stuff. Now he has to leave. Indonesia, not a fan, you know, and I know people, oh, we love Bali. Yeah, I don't. You know, it's not my favourite place. So I chose the Philippines for a number of reasons. It's English is very widely spoken. It's, you know, pretty much their official language. If you look at the way they've set their visa system up, particularly for retirement and particularly for ex-military, there's a very good system in place, and anybody over 50 can basically invest or can put 20,000 US in the bank, in your bank account that you open in your name, which is secure, which is covered by investors insurance and all the rest of it, and you'll get a visa in the Philippines. If you've ever been to the islands down south, you'll realise what an absolute tropical paradise it is. You know, Philippines has very well-structured family life. I remember going to a wedding in the Philippines, and I mean, in Australia now, another one of my little gripes is I'm well into my 50s, but I can't sit next to a child on a plane. Virgin Airlines won't allow it because I'm automatically considered a danger to that child. That's how they arrange their seating. If I go and I'm a middle-aged man with small children about, I've got people, you know, mothers have made comments if a child comes over and talk. Little do they know I would set fire to planet Earth to protect that child. I'm now in a society that doesn't trust me to pass on what I might be willing to pass on, doesn't trust me to enjoy the time with a child in a enjoyable, pleasant way for both of us, to make a child understand that somebody my age still has something relevant to say and can still assist that child. This society's lost that. I was sitting at a wedding in the Philippines, and I had a young girl, I'm guessing 8 or 10 years old, something like that, spoke really good English. And we were sitting on the edge of the pool, and the matriarch of the family, the grandmother, was sitting on a chair with her feet in the pool. And I spoke no Tagalog or Bisaya, and she spoke no English, but the little girl spoke all of it. So we spent, you know, a very, very pleasant hour with the grandmother and I talking, interpreted by the little girl while she sat on my lap in the edge of the pool. And that was considered perfectly normal. You've come to this wedding, you're part of a family now. We trust you. You will look after our family interest, our children, our life. I saw that. That's gone in Australia now. And you know, that's another one of the many reasons I don't gel with the society here at the moment. So for Philippines for me was Asia. Asia for me was the Philippines.
Yeah.
After a lot of looking. South America, if you go, there's the 4 at the bottom. Argentina, which I love. I really, really enjoy Argentina. You hear about 188% inflation rate, but when you go to Argentina, you know, people talk about, I go over, I take US dollars, I have the money that I bring with me. I'm not seeing the real Argentina. I understand that. I understand that an Argentinian working in a shop earning pesos is struggling. I get that. I can't change their life to an extent other than I can be nice and I can tip well and I can be pleasant. That's the best I can do. But if they understand I'm Australian, the only thing they might take away from work that week was this pleasant gentleman, an Australian guy, came in, tried to speak Spanish, was hilariously unfunny, and left a nice tip. That, I'm happy to leave that. I understand there's things at play I can't control. What I can do is be a decent human being when I get there. I really like the architecture, the lifestyle of Argentina. You walk around Buenos Aires, the rubbish bins are being collected, the streets are clean, the cars are in good repair, the people are well dressed. Admittedly, the tourist areas, Palermo, Rocoleta, even down to La Boca, you don't see the destruction that you think 188% inflation rate would bring. You go across to Chile, you go to Santiago, you go south down to Patagonia. That's the closest I can describe it. It's Spanish-speaking Australia in South America. The prices are similar. A hotel is similar. A hire car is similar. A meal is similar, although better quality. Australia, in every way, restaurants, the service industry is really poorly done in Australia. Over there, I guess it's because they rely on tips, but the service industry is excellent in South America. And if you're a good, decent, pleasant person, and you smile and you try, and if I tip a person $5, a local might say, "Oh, you should have tipped them $2." Okay, at the end of the day, I might have tipped them $2, but I have tipped them $5. I'm happy with $5. I think that's a reasonable price for the effort that person's put in on my behalf. And what I've left behind was not so much that Australia's a good tippers and paying over the odds, but that old guy in particular was pleasant, helpful, and decent and reasonable. And that might help you next time you're over there.
Yeah.
Paraguay is my place of choice at the moment purely because of the way their visas are set up. So with Argentina, which I will, and I use the term when I will move to Argentina, to initially set myself up there, I have to do 6 months per year for 2 years. At the moment, I don't have that time, which is why I'm going back again this year. I'll be a few weeks in Paraguay sorting a few things out. Am I allowed to mention, do you want me to mention people that I deal with, groups or over there?
Oh, it's up to you.
Oh, well, for example, there's guys like Andrew Henderson, the Nomad Capitalist, has a lot of YouTubes on the subject. I follow him quite closely. Plan B Paraguay, Paul Kitson, an Aussie, expat Aussie over there, really, really very pleasant guy to do. I enjoy dealing with him as much as I'm dealing with you, PK, to be honest. And I have a fair bit to do with him. He's very well set up, very well organised, a wealth of information. And the fact that I found him and was able to talk to him was what pushed Paraguay for me. I really, really like Uruguay. It is literally one of the safest, well-financed, best countries in South America, but the visas are a lot more difficult. And understandably, a lot of people want to move to Uruguay. So I'm quite happy with my home having maybe a slightly rougher edge to it than some people might be happy with. I'm quite comfortable in the middle of nowhere at the moment I have gravity-fed water to my house and I have wood-fired hot water and I have all those things. And I choose that here in Australia because it's very simple, comfortable lifestyle that I don't have to. If I lose power here at this house, I read a book and go to bed. It really doesn't worry me at all. I'm a voracious reader. One of the things that'll have to go is my massive book collection. I have the entire all walls of one room plus center dividers, all bookshelves.
I'm the same. We don't have a TV in our house, much to the annoyance of my son. And we have where the TV's meant to go, we have this like wall to ceiling bookshelf and it's one of those ones you go on a ladder. So it's got a ladder
Oh,
that
yeah.
I always wanted that as a kid. So when we got this house, I made sure we put that in and that's, so much better than a TV, for myself and just aesthetically as well.
I mean, you talk about TV. I don't watch it, but you hear of and you see of programs, and I cannot understand wasting 30 minutes of your life with some of that. I don't know how you'd open your head and angle grind that bit of information you just got off telly out because you don't want it. Some of the dross that passes out. For me, it's a 30-minute drive to work. So if you've recently done a YouTube or I'm listening to a podcast, I'll load all those up and I'll drive to work. That's 33 minutes where I can learn something, glean something, understand something, or even get to the point, well, no, that's not an area I wish to pursue, or it's not something I need, or I have a good understanding. I don't need to go back there. I can't understand why you'd waste time in front of a telly watching some of that rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you and me both. I wanted to ask you, so like in Australian dollars, I mean, I know it probably differs
Yep.
from country to country, but like in Australian dollars, how much do you reckon you need, like from a passive income perspective,
Yep.
every year to be able to live comfortably in those other locations?
Okay, I went overboard. You can actually get online and find the average living cost. In Paraguay, a comfortable middle class, for an example, in Paraguay, a comfortable middle class lifestyle where you eat out a couple of nights of the week, you rarely take public transport, is 24,000 US a year. And
Okay.
that's middle class living. You're not drinking champagne every night. You haven't got the latest Reeboks every week.
That's after tax dollars, right?
That's after tax dollars.
Yeah.
What I did was I set myself a little higher target. So knowing that my personal target I set at $52,000 a year, but I need to do that multiple times in case something happens. So $52,000 a year means I'll have enough to travel in airfares between all of those locations. I'll have enough to maintain property in all those locations and motorcycles in all those locations. So that was the figure I set myself to say to live in one country, I could get away with less. But because I want to travel to multiple, 52,000 is the minimum. And when I get there, I need to be careful. That's not eating in, Michelin starred restaurants. That's eating in local restaurants, which I'd prefer. I'd much rather find out where all the taxi drivers have their breakfast and walk in there and have breakfast.
Yeah.
I'd much rather support the old lady down the street that has a little taverna that only serves 3 dishes. I'd rather eat those 3 dishes than go wherever. So Paraguay, $28,000 a year. But as I said, I've set myself up with 52, or I've set my target at 52,000 Australian. So I've got my superannuation, which isn't great, but it's not bad either. I was overseas for a lot of years and, throw in a divorce and a few other things. It's still reasonable and it will still hit that target for quite a number of years. My rental properties will be structured in such a way I either hit that in rental income, it'll be reduced slightly because of outgoings, or I can tap the equity, or there's a few options there. I'll just have to see what the market's doing. But in general, that package that I put together is in place and ready to go. I've
Nice.
sort of worked out that roughly for each $52,000 I need to generate easily, I need between 750,000 and 1 million, depending on how I do it and what I do. And that's given me a great big leeway to allow for rates drops, to allow for stock market crashes, to allow for property price falls, to allow for a major problem with a property that leaves it vacant or whatever. The other place the third place, the third leg of my stool, if you like, is Tanzania. There's an island off Tanzania called Zanzibar. And I don't know if you ever want to go on a holiday one day, go to Stone Town. It is amazing. Tanzania is a Muslim country. Zanzibar in particular is like anywhere, be respectful of the local culture, try and understand a little bit of Swahili, and at least greet them in Swahili. If you want to have a beer, you're quite welcome to, but don't make any big deal about it. Certainly don't be publicly drunk. As a grey bearded man, I obviously have less problem than a young, attractive woman. I've heard there have been problems in Zanzibar, but I've also been there and spoken to women that just said it was the most pleasant, respectful place I've ever been. So, I think you make your own luck in a lot of ways. And again, there, 24,000 US, 2,000 US a month, which is just slightly over what the Social Security in the US pays out as an average, will support you quite comfortably in Tanzania. They have a good retirement visa system. You can buy property over there in your own name. You can set all that up. The Philippines, you can buy condos, which I won't. You can rent a very, very nice house out of one of the major towns. You look at an island like Dumaguete, you go to Cebu, you can have a nice, comfortable little house for $400-500 a month. A little scooter ride down to the beach. The gym is, a personal trainer at the gym might cost you $10 or $12 an hour. The food is what the food is. If you eat at a local diner, it's a couple of dollars for a local dish. If you want to go out to a restaurant, the supermarket's cheap enough.
It's like
Um,
Australia in the 80s or something like that.
I remember the 80s. Yeah, yeah, you're right. I can remember my first paycheck was $121 a fortnight in the 80s,
There you go.
$60 a week. Yeah, yeah.
There you go. And
Um,
so these
so,
countries, sorry, I just had to ask a quick question.
yep,
Sorry to cut you off. Um, do you get double taxed? Like, whether it's Africa or the Philippines or South America, you'll be, because if I'm not mistaken, you have different prongs to your strategy. You've got the super,
yes,
you've got the stocks market, you've got your properties. Let's just say property, for example, because it's a property channel.
yep,
So you'll be earning rental income net, there'll be
yep.
some net passive income. You'll still have to pay tax here. We have to pay tax there as well. And does that kind of defeat the purpose or what's
No,
going
it depends on the country. So Paraguay in particular, there's no tax payable on foreign income that's transferred into Paraguay. They'll expect you'll spend it there. They'll make their money there. So it depends on how you set it up. So if I leave properties here generating income, then whatever that income generates, I will pay tax on that. I will also have the tax deductions. The government just recently passed a law where any foreign income I earn will also be taxed. The fine print. So if I invest in properties in Paraguay or Tanzania or the Philippines and earn an income, I have to declare that. And from what I understand, talking to an advisor at the moment, I'm still going through that process, is that I would have to declare that income. It would be added to my taxable income here, but I wouldn't be able to claim any deductions from that foreign earned income. So I had a business overseas, and our seed money went in there for a couple of years before we actually were able to draw any profit from it. But on the books, it looked like we were making profit, even though we were rolling it back into the country, into the company. So Australia's now turned around and said if I wanted to do that same setup again, I would be paying tax on money I hadn't even earned yet, that I wasn't able to earn because I'm putting my own money in to get myself into a position where that company will make money in its own right.
Yeah,
So it's a bit messy. I ideally, if you're out of Australia, if I'm only in Australia less than a month a year, I'm not an Australian resident for tax purposes, although I will still pay on my rental properties. There's reciprocal tax agreements with countries like Singapore, like Thailand, like the Philippines, and all the rest of it. It depends on what asset I'm holding in each country. My idea is to offshore one of those legs completely and utterly. So it's completely devoid of any Australian market, whether it be the superannuation, whether it be the property market or whatever, is to take a chunk of that money and ensure I have one of the legs of my stool is offshore outside of Australia, even if I do have to declare it. Well, when I do have to declare it, not even if. Um, it's you're not going to get away with not paying tax. You're going to have to do it. I understand that, and I mean um, I don't like using the term lucky because the harder you work, the luckier you seem to get. And I've worked really, really hard, really, really long hours, but I've got myself into a position where I am fortunate that I'm going to have the lifestyle, even if I do have to pay the tax. I can reduce it, I can get it down. I can't ever get rid of it
of course. Yeah.
unless I completely divest myself of Australia, which is on the cards one day. But initially, I just have to accept the fact that remotely my accountant is going to have to sort my paperwork out every year for a while. By that stage, though, I'll be drawing down on my superannuation and whatever that looks like, whether I leave it with where it's invested now, whether I take it. I mean, you can take say you took a bunch of money, you sold a property superannuation to Singapore, put it in the bank, you can get 5.5% there. Singapore being as safe, if not safer than Australia, but also outside Australia, if that's important to you. It's you're more like it's a balance. There's three legs. So what's the property market doing at the time? What's the stock market doing at the time? Where am I? What's Australia looking like? What's their current laws? And the Australian government changes the superannuation and tax laws so often. I mean, tax accountants can't keep up with it, so that you've got to play along with a bit.
Yeah.
Go to a country like Paraguay where you have no tax on your personal income, then at least that side of it's. If I become a tax resident, if I'm there for most of the year and I'm not in Australia, that makes it easier again in a way, in that there's no declaration. Argentina at the moment, if you do the right type of visa, retirement visa, there's tax over a certain amount, but that's variable as well, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it there. Chile is fairly highly taxed like Australia, but they they do tax foreign income, but when it's a pension, and it's quite low tax. Tanzania, like a lot of those countries, the tax man and I will have a talk and see what we can work out between us.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
It's
go
like
from
that,
there.
is it? Okay.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
yeah, that's I wouldn't say it's a difficult one, but it's a continually moving target, that one, and you literally have to trying to plan 3 or 4 years out. You can put things in place. There's companies here in Australia that specialise in expat strategies for expat wealth. One based in Dubai, they got an office in the Gold Coast and all the rest of it. I've dealt with them a bit and plan on dealing with them more. They give you the bigger picture, and look, you really can't say now because you're not ready to pull the trigger today. But if you move in this direction, we think in a couple of years you'll be in a better position. If you move in this direction, these will be the ramifications of that decision.
Yeah.
That's when my fudge factor, the allowances became I realised had to be quite a bit bigger to allow for things like that.
Right, right. Zooming out a bit, I guess, the cost of living in Australia, and not just Australia, but you mentioned the word the West before. I mean, it's not just Australia, it's in North America, it's Western Europe, New Zealand. It seems that a lot of these countries have got themselves into a pickle where, I mean, I travel a lot, regardless of where you go, it seems that everything is more expensive. Wages in real terms are basically the same, if not maybe a little bit backwards. But no one, I mean, people are complaining, people are doing it tough, but no one's really creating a revolution. There's no real systemic or fundamental structural change going on in our economies for the better. It's sort of just, how do we patch fix this? How do we patch fix that, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess what I'm asking is like, are you finding in your generation in Australia, a lot of people are considering moving away from the quote unquote West to maybe some of these other places where, once again, don't get me wrong, it's not like
Yeah,
cost of living isn't an issue in some of these countries, but it's just cheaper. I mean, you
yeah,
mentioned $52,000. I mean, and once again, I don't mean to be disrespectful. $52,000 is a lot of money for a retiree, even in Australia. But the lifestyle on $50,000, unless you have your own home paid off, is struggle street. So do you
yeah.
find a lot of people moving abroad like
A,
this?
a lot, yeah. Where I work now, I would say most, if I 70 or 80% of the people my age or a bit younger are planning on leaving Australia. And that normally means Southeast Asia. The trouble with Australia, and again, referring back to the politics, is literally Australians are very apathetic, and most of the West is now very apathetic. Basically, they've got a roof over their head, they do have a coffee, they have football on the telly, they have beer, they have whatever it is that's basically important to them. For people to actually stand up and say enough is enough, you really need to take something away. And they look at what happened in Canada, whether you agree with it, with the trucker strike. They had their bank accounts closed down. That's the ability of governments now. People go, all right, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like XYZ, I don't like whatever I don't like, but I'm not prepared to stand up for it because I'm not prepared to lose my bank account and have the government looking over my shoulder. So, our system here, you will only ever end up with one side of the same coin. Toss a coin, we've got what they call a two-party preferred system. But it just, for me, it doesn't work. I'm sure your audience would vehemently disagree, and I wish them all the very best. I'm actually not going to be here to argue with them and argue. But definitely in the industry I'm in, I mean, I'd know 20 people that I work with that are married or in relationships, Asian wives from Thailand, Cambodia, the Philippines, Malaysia, or whatever. Their default plan was always to go back to their wife's country. And I visit friends over there that are married and living over there, and the quality of life they have in Thailand is amazing. One friend in particular, they've got a stilt house built up, and it's in two wings, and he and his wife live in one wing, and then and you can't see the two wings from each other; they're very private. And then there's the middle of the V, if you like, is the outdoor entertaining area with his barbecue, and they've got a kitchen and a lounge room. And the other wing is 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom for when friends come to stay. and you walk out onto the deck and you're looking down the river, two V's, and you're up on the cliff above it, and they built that house for $120,000, a few years back now, but it's a spectacular lifestyle. And you can walk down to his boat, and we went for a fish, and you can get on a scooter and ride into town. And, his wife's a beautiful lady. She's a lovely, lovely lady, very pleasant, relaxed. You go to Asia and they still got a bit of zen about them that we seem to have lost here. And it's just a really good, enjoyable lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's funny, that couple set their children up with property in Australia, and there was the son and the daughter were given the keys to a unit, completely unencumbered, with a bit of advice in a book, and said, look, you can do with this as you will. You can use the equity to buy more property. You can do what you like. This is your inheritance. You're never going to see any more out of mum and dad, sort of thing. And I was talking to him a couple of months back, and his daughter's on about her fourth property now, and she used the equity to buy another one and put rental in. And his son's banging on the door of the bank every time there's an equity increase to grab it out and go and party again. So, he obviously didn't get the message. Yeah, it's a very common thing, and it's going to become more and more common.
Yeah,
You look at some of the visas that are being put in place, particularly targeting retirees. The next big one is going to be Vietnam.
right.
They don't have a retiree visa as such, but they're starting to understand the level of investment people are prepared to put in. If you were to go to an Asian retirement village, if you want to use the term retirement village, and you buy in and you spend $150,000 on a nice townhouse, and you have care available, you have cleaning, you have whatever, and that possibly that might take you through to critical care in your old age if it's needed. When you pass on and die, they're more than happy to have lived a life that goes back to the group who does it. Life continues, everything is good. Yet those people have, if you like the tropics, if you like golf, if you like beaches, have had a fantastic lifestyle you can't have here in Australia.
Mhm.
I have I'm very well paid. I work in the mining industry. It is good money, but I have friends who aren't very well paid, and they've got food on the table, they've got a roof on their head, but they will struggle all the way till I'm not going to be working when I'm 67. I'm going to be working when I'm 60. I just see an endless cycle of toil and struggle unless you change the goalposts, unless you move the path. And there's another couple that I've been following on YouTube only recently, and it's called A Dirt Cheap Life in Paraguay. And they're an Australian New Zealand couple with two children that have relocated, and the gist you get from it again was because they didn't enjoy the politics. But
Yeah.
they do, how do you buy a house? How do you buy a car? And all I can think of for those children is they will have the best life. They will grow up speaking English at home. They'll second language at school. They'll understand. They've been in Australia. They now live in Paraguay. There's other options. They'll bring up very worldly, intelligent, adaptable kids. I'm not seeing that in Australia. And you don't want to say in my time it was better, because it wasn't. It wasn't any better. It was just different. But I look at, I deal with apprentices now, and I look at some of them, and again, you don't want to say it was better, but I think, no, at my age when I was an apprentice, even though it was in the military, it was a totally different ballpark. And you can't really use the term immaturity, but it's just a lot different, and you think, I'm not sure you're going to be in a position to grab what you need from life. There's things you have to reach out and grab, and I don't think you've been prepared adequately to grab and hold on no matter how hard it gets. And I kind of wonder what their life will look like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's sad.
well, I think all the things you're talking about might become even more exacerbated going forward as the sort of divide between the haves and have-nots in Australia, well, many places around the world, but especially in Australia, there's just more of a wedge being put in
Yeah,
through
yeah,
things like, monetary policy, fiat currency, just, government policies in general, a debt-laden society that it just perpetuates the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I want to request you, I know we didn't talk about this, but do you know that that study you referenced? I listened to you. And you were referencing that study where if there was this hypothetical government that comes in and takes over Australia, and
Yeah,
how the society reacts to that. I want you to share that because, and I know we're getting late here as well. Just in closing, I want you to share that because there was this quote that I heard, which goes that um 70% of people, I'm not this just not Australia, just
yeah,
generally 70% of people rather die than think. There's 20% of people who think they think, but they're actually
yeah,
just consuming,
yeah,
mainstream media and opining on it. And there's actually only 10% of the population who actually think, right?
yeah.
So I want my audience, including myself, to always challenge ourselves and look beyond what's just in front of us. And that's why I had you on today as well, because it's a very unique story. But if you could share that study, because when I first heard it, I was like, damn, that's actually
Yeah.
pretty true.
I read it I think it was in the 90s, and it came out of a think tank in Canberra when I was in the military. And the premise from memory was basically if the Australian government were to be replaced by a government, a foreign power, whatever, tomorrow, bang, the Australian government, whichever party is now out of power, we've locked all the politicians up. And I mean, I can't argue that it'd probably be a good move if they were to go down that path right now. But there was a foreign government in power, and the foreign government got on the television that night and said, "Righto, PK, righto, Shane, go to work tomorrow. Your bank account stays open. You're go and have a beer at the pub. Watch the football on Saturday. Buy your favourite brand of cheese. Make sure your Vegemite. Nothing changes. Everything is exactly the same tomorrow. But your tax dollars will come to us. The natural resources in Australia are now ours. Da, 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 everything that can be gleaned from the country. And it would be obviously a sliding scale to ruin. But basically, they worked out that the vast majority of Australians would get up the next morning, put the keys in the car, and they drive to work and they continue on. Very few people would say, this has tipped the barrow enough that I'm actually going to fight actively against this. There's also a military saying, and they talk about 100 people on the battlefield. 80 shouldn't be there. 10 are just filling in space. 9, are reasonable and do a good job and are leaders, but one of them is an actual warrior. The one that you read in the books about. That's the 1 in 100. You know what I mean? I think Australia's the same. I have a very small circle of friends, like most people, very trustworthy. For me, if I can't hand the keys to my house to you, then why would you be my friend? If there's my house, there's everything in it, there's everything I own, I trust you implicitly. If you need it, take it. Go in there, put my shirt on, eat the food out of my fridge, drink the beer out of my fridge, ride my motorbike, do what you need to do. That's the level I trust. If I can't do that, I don't even want to talk to them. I'll deal with people at work, but certainly I don't have that level of trust with most. It's It's a really, you delve back to society and government again, and something I can't respect and can't enjoy. I think people have been pushed to a point where life is too comfortable that they're not prepared to push away from it. I find that, I could sit here for the rest of my life. My house is paid off. It's exactly what I want it to do. I could shut my mouth, I could not watch television, and I could probably get by. But what I find is more and more government intrusion in particular. Oh, you have to fill this out. We've decided to go CBDC. In Western Australia now, the largest petition in Western Australian history was about the recent amendments to the Firearms Act. The trouble with that is that there were no facts that were used to arrive at the parameters they set for that act. The police commissioner in WA released a map of every gun owner in WA on the internet, and they took all the street names off, but they were very easy to find. So WA now is just rife with break and enters and home invasions. The police minister won't answer for that. To me, I just can't respect and can't allow that. There's nothing in me that would let me turn a blind eye to that. There's not a lot I can do about it apart from sign a petition and protest. The only thing I can really do is remove myself from that situation to somewhere where I'm a lot happier and more comfortable with the government. Or, you look at Paraguay as they talk about. I was speaking to a real estate agent there, and they had an industrial unit, and it had a roller door and then sliding security doors and a personnel door, and it was all concrete walls, concrete roof. And it went up and it had a mezzanine with a shower and a toilet and all that on the mezzanine, like a little workshop area. And I was speaking to a real estate agent in Paraguay, and I said, well, they were $30,000 each inside a gated industrial park. And I said, what sort of usage, what could you put it through? And this real estate agent said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, obviously it's zoned industrial. You have to have a business. It's, as we would in Australia. They turned around and said, it's your property. Don't upset your next door neighbour. And I went, what do you mean by that? He goes, do whatever the hell you like with it, but I would suggest you talk to the guys that work on the gate, give them a carton of beer, explain who you are and what you're doing. Talk to your next door neighbour, get them to keep an eye on it. And if you want to fit it out as a one-bedroom man cave with motorbikes in the front, toolbox, little kitchenette in the back and a bed upstairs and use that as your base, you're fully welcome to it. And the comment from that same real estate agent, he said, really, the government of Paraguay, you have to jump through, and Paraguay again, but Argentina similar. There's a certain set of hurdles, this paperwork, that apostille document, that criminal background check, da 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 da. Once you do that, they haven't got time to go dealing with a retired gringo. Okay, don't do anything dumb. Don't get caught by the police. Do what you like. Don't upset anybody.
Yeah.
The idea of I have a friend in Thailand, and he volunteers at an English school for Thais that speak fairly high level English purely because they want somebody with an Australian accent. I really like the idea of being able to do something like that. That's the sort of return I'd like to give. To me, there's just, I can't see Australia getting better in my version of better. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And as I said, I don't want to upset anybody, argue and shout. I don't want to go and protest and throw rocks at people. I'd much rather wave, say goodbye, and wish you all the best. And if I could, by doing an interview like you, say, look, there are other options out there. This is how you do it. Or this is how I did it. This is what I looked into. These are the people I spoke to. Not saying that it's a perfect fit for everybody. You're not saying that I've even got it all right just yet. It's still a bit of a work in progress. But hopefully somebody sits out there and goes, you know what, it'd be nice to set up in Australia, but it would also be nice to have somewhere to go, whether it be for holidays, whether it to give the kids exposure to a completely different culture, whether it's, you think that Australia might get to the point where we can't return and leave at will again. All those options are there. And I sincerely hope people look into it, take it and understand it. And I think, again, all those countries are outside the West. I look at myself as a bit of an ambassador for Australia. I've got to turn up and be a decent human being, do nice things, whatever. I kind of find after all those years overseas, it's hard to describe, but I'm not nearly as comfortable in the West as I grew up, as I used to be. Society just doesn't quite roll the way I want it or want to see it or deal with it. That's weird, but that's the only way I can explain it.
No, it's very well explained as well, and I think you're probably expressing the voice and the opinion and the perspectives of thousands, if not, I don't know, tens of thousands of people in Australia, and so that's why I think it's really useful to understand where you're coming from and also like how you've actually, it's not some ideological dream. You're actually worked, very hard to make it a reality. And I think, I'm trying to, for everyone who's watching and listening, it will be very useful because sometimes we can get into this habit of saying Australia is an amazing country, which, by the way, I personally think it's amazing. But there are other opinions out there, and by
Yeah.
introducing other opinions, then we can actually think, right? We're not just going down this silo of, this is the best country in the world. And, let's not worry about the cost of living crisis, inflation, house prices, the government's doing the best they can, blah, 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 blah. We actually have to challenge the status quo. That doesn't mean we don't love Australia. I love Australia, very grateful to be here. But the more we think, the more we shake that, the jar of rocks, the more we can actually improve our lives. And I think that was for me at least, that was the purpose of this episode, and hopefully for people in your shoes, Shane, that are, I don't know, in their 40s, 50s, maybe even 60s, they might have been thinking about, how they use property to move overseas to enable that lifestyle at some point in the future. Hopefully, this has given them some inspiration. You've also mentioned a bunch of names which they can maybe look up. And
Yep.
of course, Shane, you're in the Facebook group where they can presumably, if they want to, they can get in touch with
Yeah,
you.
yeah, for sure.
And so yeah, if I could act like a some sort of connection point where people can, think, create action plans and actually achieve their goals and not just, how do you say, like just be very superficial and just sort of float with the tide wherever the tide is
Yeah,
going. I don't think that's a good idea because who knows, the tide may take you into the wrong direction and you might end up being 65 and like, oh damn it, I'm living off a pension, 32,000 or however much it is,
yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
not enjoying life, and so think
Yep.
early, think hard, and do something about it. And I think, of course, your experiences overseas and everything that you've been through professionally have really impelled you to think about life and come up with a very crystal clear life philosophy. To some extent, it doesn't matter what the life philosophy is, as long as you have one, as long as you put thought into it and you have conviction in it. Everyone's different, everyone has their own purpose, but living with purpose, I think, very, very joyful.
Exactly. And I mean that to me, it sort of branches back into politics. I have way more respect for a person who is vehemently adamant that their politics is correct than I have for the flip-flopping, wishy-washy, don't stand for something, commit to something. Be an example to others, be an example to your children. I might not agree with your politics, but at least if you're vehement about it, can you discuss it and it can explain what it is that attracts you to that sphere of politics? That's worthy of respect. You've thought about it, you've understood it, you've worked out how it affects you, you'd work out what you'd like to see in the future. That's 100%. It's these ones like, oh, I don't vote, I don't care, I don't, but I hate it. Well, all right, if you're not voting and you don't care, you got no say in whether you hate it or whether you don't.
Sure,
I
sure.
yeah, no, take 10% of what I say or take 90%, but it'd be nice if here's, hopefully there's somebody else that can give a different point of view in a YouTube like this one day. But if somebody only took one little portion of it and went, you know what, that bit actually suits me, none of the rest does, or those pieces. Like for me, it's all about information, any information I can get that, I might go track sideways before I can go ahead for a while, but that's what I'm chasing. I always try and run that. And probably your Facebook group, your pages, and all the rest of it. I've got to say, without without being any condescending, are some of the best. I read them every day. I have a look every day. Always look for whatever Ricky's talking about. He's always a bit of a laugh. Now that I
Nice.
mention him. But no, there's some really, really good information and really good people, and I think a lot more need to get on and have an understanding of what all that looks like, mate. You've done very, very well, and I've got a lot from it, and I thank you for that.
Look, what I've done is pales in insignificance in comparison to your contribution to various countries and various pursuits, in your professional life. So that sentiment, right back at you. And anyone who's watching, listening, is buying an Albany, hot tip. It's pretty good. So
Yeah,
check it
go on and
out.
pay. Yeah,
Pretty good. Data's lining up. Anyway, thank you so much, Shane. I'll wrap it up here. I appreciate your time. Good to connect like this as well. It's good to
yeah.
actually speak with group members who are really good contributors and try to add value to everyone's life. I appreciate your time.
No, thank you, PK. Thank you very much, mate.
And thank you everyone for watching and listening. Something a bit different, but I hopefully it gets you thinking in areas where you wouldn't normally mull over. And I think in 10, 20 years time, if you do expand your horizons, then you'll really thank yourself for it. Thank you again, and thank you, Shane. Appreciate it.
Thanks, PK.